the misty early morning on a blueberry farm in Maine, a resilient black single father, pouring all his hopes into one last harvest to secure his daughter's future, unexpectedly rescues a woman from a car crash and lets her stay the night. What he doesn't know is that his act of unconditional kindness will change both their lives and his daughter's forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The early morning fog, thick and cool, clung to the blueberry bushes on Samuel Miller's farm, draping the sprawling fields in a soft, ethereal gray. Beyond the mist, the first hints of sunrise painted the distant horizon in muted shades of rose and gold over rural Maine. Sam, a man whose early 40s had etched lines of weariness around his eyes but failed to dim the quiet determination within them, stepped out onto the porch of his weathered farmhouse. He wore the familiar uniform of faded work jeans and a well-worn flannel shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle from years of tending this very land. This farm, nestled deep in the rolling hills, was more than just property. It was a living chronicle of his family. Generations of Millers had coaxed life from this soil, transforming wild blueberry patches into organized rows, each bush a testament to relentless effort. Sam had never considered leaving, not when friends packed up for city lights, not when the local economy faltered, and certainly not after his wife Sarah had passed away 6 years prior. Her illness had consumed their savings, leaving behind an ache in his chest that no amount of hard work seemed capable of filling, and a mountain of medical debt that loomed larger with each passing season. Now, it was just him and Lily, his 8-year-old daughter. Lily, with her bright, inquisitive eyes and a spirit that sparkled even when the world felt dim, was his world. She possessed a unique way of seeing things, a vibrant imagination that often struggled to connect with the rigid structures of traditional schooling. After years of careful observation and conversations with specialists, it had become clear that Lily thrived in environments that embraced her neurodivergent mind. A specialized academy almost 2 states away offered exactly what she needed: tailored curricula, empathetic educators, and a community where her way of thinking was celebrated, not just accommodated. But the tuition for even the first year was a sum that felt insurmountable, a vast, uncrossable ocean of numbers. This year's harvest, a precarious gamble against unpredictable weather and fluctuating market prices, was his only hope. If the late summer sun held, if the frost stayed away, and if the buyers paid a fair price, the blueberries might just bring in enough to cover the initial tuition deposit for Lily's academy, pay off a significant portion of the lingering farm loan, and keep food on their simple kitchen table for another season. He had run the numbers countless times, late into the night, hunched over the worn kitchen table, a single lamp casting long shadows. There was no margin for error. No room for equipment breakdowns, late payments, or unforeseen disaster. Every single berry, every delicate cluster, carried the immense weight of Lily's future. Sam walked the fields slowly, his gaze sweeping over the low-lying bushes, examining the ripening blue fruit. As the fog began to lift, revealing the vibrant green rose stretching towards the newly bright sky, Sam paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. From this vantage point, the small farmhouse was visible, its white paint peeling, a section of the roof patched years ago after a stubborn leak. But it was home. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Lily was likely in the kitchen, humming some tuneless melody as she read from a worn children's book, a bowl of oatmeal cooling on the counter beside her. She didn't complain about the drafty rooms or the clothes that were always slightly too big. She just believed in him, in the future, and in the quiet, undeniable power of hard work. Sam believed it too, even if that belief often felt heavy, a weight as substantial as the Maine sky pressing down on his shoulders. With one last lingering look over his beloved blueberries, Sam turned back towards the small, unpainted shed that served as his workshop. There was always more to do. It happened just past noon. The sun, high and relentless, baked the dirt paths into a hard, cracked crust, drawing sweat from Sam's brow faster than his hand could wipe it away. He was crouched beside the main irrigation pump, wrestling with a stubborn valve, the rusted wrench slipping in his grasp, when the sound shattered the peaceful quiet. First a high-pitched shriek of tires struggling against loose gravel, then a thunderous impact that split the air like a gunshot. It came from the southern edge of the farm, where the winding gravel road curved sharply, a deceptive bend unfamiliar to most outsiders. Sam froze for only a second, his muscles tensing. He dropped the wrench, the metallic clang echoing in the sudden silence. His boots pounded over the dry soil as he ran, his breath catching not from exertion but from a cold, sinking certainty that something had gone terribly wrong. As he sprinted past rows of ripening blueberries, a column of dark smoke was already beginning to rise, twisting into the pristine blue sky. By the time he reached the clearing, the devastation was stark and immediate. A sleek black sports car, an impossibly expensive foreign machine that had probably gleamed just hours ago, was now buried nose first into the very heart of his blueberry field. The windshield had fractured into a spiderweb of cracks, and one of the car doors, designed to swing upwards, hung awkwardly, twisted unnaturally from its frame. Small, hungry flames licked at the undercarriage, dancing in quick, unpredictable bursts around the crumpled hood. The acrid smell of leaking fuel cut through the summer air, sharp and sickening. Time seemed to stretch, elastic and slow. The field, usually alive with a buzzing of bees, fell eerily silent. Sam didn't hesitate. He ran straight to the driver's side, yanking on the door handle. It was jammed, unyielding. Through the haze of smoke and shattered glass, he saw a figure slumped against the steering wheel, blood trickling from her temple, her eyes closed, face slack. A woman. He grabbed a heavy rock from a nearby pile of fieldstones and, with all the desperate strength he possessed, smashed the side window. Shards of glass rained down as he reached inside, cutting his forearm on the jagged edges, but he barely registered the pain as he pulled the unconscious stranger from the wreckage. The woman was heavier than she looked, tall, slender, yet utterly dead weight. Sam hoisted her over one shoulder, stumbling backward as a fierce flicker of flame erupted near the fuel tank, closer this time, angrier. They were no more than 10 yards from the car when the explosion came. The sound was like a clap of thunder directly overhead, a violent, deafening roar that rolled across the fields and rattled Sam to the bone. A rush of searing heat chased them, forcing him to duck low, shielding the woman with his own body. When he finally dared to look back, his heart seemed to plummet into his stomach. Half the blueberry field, his livelihood, his entire season's work, Lily's tuition, their future, was burning in front of his eyes. Reduced to hungry orange flames and plumes of black, acrid smoke, the delicate bushes curled inward like dying fingers, rows of vibrant green turned to ash in seconds. It was all going up in smoke, a lifetime of labor, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. For a long, agonizing moment Sam stood there, his breath heaving, the stranger still slung over his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't curse or cry out or fall to his knees. He just watched, the scene burning itself into his memory. Not because he didn't care, but because in that moment carrying too much emotion would have broken him, and he didn't have the luxury of breaking. Not with Lily depending on him. Eventually, he adjusted the woman's weight and started walking toward the house, his boots crunching over burnt leaves and smoldering ground. The stranger groaned faintly as they passed the tool shed, and Sam glanced down. Blood still dripped steadily from his own arm, a stark red against the soot on his skin. "You're lucky," he muttered softly, his voice rough. "One more minute and we'd both be gone." Back at the house, he laid the woman gently on the worn living room couch, the springs sighing in protest. He stripped off his soot-covered flannel shirt, the smell of smoke clinging to the fabric, and, moving with practiced calm, cleaned the woman's head wound with a damp cloth. The fire, still raging in the distance, cast a faint, flickering glow through the window, but Sam didn't look back at it again. He had already memorized the shape of the loss. It was scorched into his mind as deeply as the earth outside. What mattered now was that the woman was alive, and Sam, despite everything, had chosen to save her, not because it made sense, but because it was the right thing to do. The afternoon sun had softened into a dusky amber by the time the stranger stirred on the couch. Sam sat at the small kitchen table, a towel wrapped tightly around his bleeding arm, sipping slowly from a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. Across the room the woman groaned, shifted, and finally opened her eyes, blinking against the dim light filtering through the dusty curtain. For a moment there was pure, raw confusion etched across her face, as if she couldn't quite place where she was or how she had arrived. Then her hand went instinctively to her head, fingers brushing the dried blood along her temple. Sam stood slowly, his worn boots creaking against the wood floor, and crossed the room without a word, handing the woman a glass of water. She took it with shaking hands, downed it in 2 gulps, and finally rasped out the question Sam had been expecting. "What happened?" Sam answered simply. "You crashed into my field, your car caught fire, I pulled you out." There was no bitterness in his voice, no demand for explanation or apology, just the plain truth, delivered with the same quiet stoicism a farmer might use to deliver news about the weather. The woman looked at him, her gaze clear now, then turned her eyes toward the window, where a thin column of smoke still curled lazily against the horizon. She swallowed hard, the weight of realization settling as she began to piece together the implications. "That was your blueberry farm?" she said slowly, as if trying to confirm the scale of the damage. Sam nodded once. "Most of it's gone." A long silence followed, the kind that stretches heavy and awkward between 2 people who are strangers, yet are suddenly bound by something unspoken, something profound. The woman sat upright now, wincing as her back protested, and looked around the modest room. The furniture was old but meticulously clean. On the far wall hung a family photo. Sam, a younger version of himself, standing beside a smiling woman with kind eyes and a tiny girl with bright curls and a grin full of promise. That girl's voice suddenly rang out from the hallway, breaking the silence. "Daddy, is she awake?" A moment later Lily appeared in the doorway, a well-loved storybook clutched in one hand, her hair a charming tangle of curls. Her eyes flicked to the stranger on the couch, cautious but undeniably curious. Sam nodded. "She's awake. Bring her some more water, sweet pea." Lily stepped forward, her small hand offering the glass without a word. The woman, still dazed, still unsure, took it with a murmured thank you. Her eyes lingered on Lily's gentle face. There was something humbling in the way the child looked at her, not with awe or suspicion, but with the steady calm of someone used to navigating the unexpected, used to finding small acts of kindness in a world that could sometimes feel big and confusing. Once Lily had retreated, Sam eased himself into the worn armchair across from the woman and studied her for a beat. "What's your name?" he asked. The woman hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands, then replied, "Eleanor. Eleanor Vance." She said it like a confession, not expecting recognition, but the name landed with no particular weight in the room. Sam simply nodded. He didn't follow tech news or business journals. He followed rainfall patterns and soil pH. "Well, Miss Vance," Sam said, his voice steady but tired. "You've got a concussion, but you're alive. That's something." Eleanor looked down at her scraped hands, still wrapped in the makeshift bandages Sam had patched together from the kitchen drawer. She nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said quietly, "it is." For a while they sat like that, 2 people from vastly different worlds, sharing the same heavy silence. Then Sam, perhaps out of instinct, or the simple, quiet pride of a father, or something deeper that needed to be spoken, began to talk. Not about the accident, not about the ruined blueberries, but about Lily. He told Eleanor how bright she was, how she saw patterns others missed, how she built intricate worlds from discarded parts, how her mind worked in ways that were both beautiful and challenging. He spoke of the specialized academy, the hope it represented, the desperation that this harvest would fund it. He spoke with a quiet reverence, like a man reciting scripture, and Eleanor listened. Really listened. Perhaps for the first time in a long while she listened without agenda, without a mental to-do list. She looked around the house again, and this time she noticed the small things she had missed earlier. A final notice pinned to the corkboard beside the fridge, its red lettering stark against the white. A worn pamphlet for Lily's academy, dog-eared and underlined, lying on the small side table. A spiral notebook filled with Lily's painstakingly drawn blueprints for fantastical inventions, next to carefully calculated columns of numbers for tuition and expenses, circled and revised a dozen times. This wasn't just a family struggling, this was a family fighting to stay afloat, with grace, with dignity, and with absolutely no room left for one more fire. When Sam finally stood to make a fresh pot of coffee, the quiet hiss of the old percolator filling the room, Eleanor said nothing. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer money. She simply sat there, holding the immense weight of what she now knew, and feeling, perhaps for the first time in years, what it truly meant to owe someone something that couldn't possibly be measured in dollars. She watched Sam moving in the kitchen, watched the last rays of sun setting against the horizon, casting the burnt edges of the blueberry fields in shades of bronze and sorrow. And she understood, without being told, that she hadn't just crashed into someone's land, she had crashed into a man's last chance, and that man, without a second thought, had saved her life anyway. Morning arrived not with fanfare but with the low hum of insects and the earthy, acrid scent of scorched soil still lingering in the cool air. The sun had barely begun to lift over the eastern hills when Eleanor stirred, blinking into the soft light filtering through the living room window. She sat up slowly, her body sore but functional, the memory of fire and Sam's determined face the last clear image before blacking out. For a moment she thought it might have been a dream, until she noticed the bandage on her head, the clean, rough-spun blanket draped over her, and the faint, rhythmic sounds of someone working outside. Curious, she rose, careful with each movement, and stepped onto the small, creaking porch. What she saw made her pause, a silent knot forming in her chest. Sam was already out in the field, his boots deep in the charred earth, his frame bent slightly as he moved between the rows with methodical, almost meditative intent. The field was a mess of blackened stalks and ash, a landscape of desolate ruin, but Sam wasn't standing in it with despair. He was moving, he was working, with a small hand spade in one hand and a tattered canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He was inspecting the damage with the detached precision of a man who had no time to mourn. He bent to check the soil in certain patches, pulling up roots that might still hold a flicker of life, breaking off melted irrigation lines to be replaced later, salvaging what little could be saved. Eleanor stepped further into the yard and saw two elderly men, neighbors perhaps, their faces grim but resolute, hauling away the husk of her ruined car. Its frame was twisted and blackened, the sleek emblem barely recognizable. They worked without complaint, without a word, as if doing what needed to be done was reason enough. One nodded to Sam, who lifted his head just long enough to return the gesture before continuing to rake out debris from the nearest row. There was soot on his face, blood on his sleeve from yesterday's cuts, and a quiet fire in his eyes that made it clear he had already accepted the loss. And now he was moving forward. Eleanor stood in stunned silence. She had seen men react with fury over far less. She had seen lawsuits filed over scratched paint jobs, watched grown men shout over market fluctuations they couldn't control, over contracts that crumbled. But here was a man who had just lost the one thing he depended on to give his daughter a chance, to keep a roof over their heads, to secure their future. And still, he chose work over bitterness. Still, he chose to plant again, to find the sliver of hope in the ashes. Sam eventually noticed Eleanor watching and walked over, wiping his brow with the back of his wrist. "You're up," he said, his voice calm as ever. "Head feeling better?" "Yeah," Eleanor replied, her voice low, a little rough. "Better, thanks to you." She hesitated before continuing, glancing at the devastated field. "I didn't expect you to be out here already." Sam shrugged, not unkindly. "I can't unburn what's been burned, but I can figure out what's still alive." They stood together for a moment, looking over the damage, the stark ridges of soot marking where flourishing blueberry bushes had once stood tall and hopeful. "This field," Sam said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the devastation. It was supposed to be everything. Lily's school, groceries, loan payments now. I'll have to find another way." Eleanor felt the full weight of those words settle like a stone in her chest, and yet Sam hadn't asked her for anything. No blame, no demand, no anger. Just a quiet truth, delivered like a man delivering the morning's weather report. Sam bent down again, brushing away blackened mulch to reveal a small patch of green shoots that had somehow survived, sheltered by a large ancient rock. "Not everything burned," he murmured, a flicker of something that resembled hope in his eyes. "This corner got spared. Maybe enough to replant with what I've got saved. It's late in the season, but I'll make do." He looked up at Eleanor then, not with accusation, but with something far more difficult to bear. "Grace." Eleanor could barely meet his gaze. She cleared her throat, suddenly unsure how to respond, unsure how to carry the immense weight of what this man had lost because of her. I'll make arrangements," she said clumsily, her usual composed demeanor gone. "For the car to be cleared. The insurance, I'll pay for what I—" Sam shook his head gently. "That car is already gone. Nothing to fix there. And I won't let this field die just because of one fire. I got a daughter about to be the first in the family to truly thrive in a place that understands her. That dream still lives. I'll find a way." Eleanor stood frozen. She had no words, only a growing certainty that this man had saved more than just her life. He had shown her something she'd forgotten existed. Honor without expectation, resilience without resentment. And she knew, as surely as she'd ever known anything in her life, that this wasn't where their story would end. When Sam turned back to the field and resumed his quiet, methodical work, Eleanor quietly returned to the house. She found a piece of paper on the kitchen table, pulled a pen from the drawer, and wrote 5 words that felt wholly inadequate but undeniably honest. "Thank you. I'll be back soon." She folded the note carefully and placed it beneath Sam's favorite coffee mug on the kitchen table. Then she left, unnoticed, the burned field at her back, and something burning in her own chest that had nothing to do with fire. 3 days had passed since that fire-scarred dawn when Eleanor Vance had disappeared with nothing more than a handwritten note and a silent promise. Sam hadn't truly expected her to return. Not really. He'd folded the paper, tucked it into his worn Bible between Psalm 23 and a letter from Lily's future academy, a letter filled with hope and a daunting tuition schedule, and gone back to work. There was still earth to tend, even if most of it had turned to soot and silence. He had salvaged what he could, meticulously sorting through the few untouched bushes, rebuilt the damaged irrigation line with spare pipe he'd scavenged from an old barn, and planted late-season seedlings in the one corner that hadn't burned. He'd called in favors, exchanging labor with neighboring farmers for second-hand berry plants, for a few hours of an old tractor for advice on late-season growth. It wasn't enough. He knew it wouldn't be. But it was what he had, and Sam Miller had never been the kind of man to stop just because the math didn't work in his favor. It was just afternoon when the noise came. First the soft grind of heavy tires on the gravel road, then the distinct crunch of massive wheels rolling past his fence line, much louder than any local farmer's truck. Sam was bent over near the well pump, elbow deep in rusted bolts, sweat tracing lines down his temple. He heard it, but didn't look up right away. Folks got lost out here all the time, thinking the dirt road might lead to town. Then a second engine joined the first, a low hum, then a third, a powerful diesel growl. By the time he straightened, brushing his hands on his worn jeans, he could see them. Vehicles unlike any he'd ever seen parked along his fence line. 2 long, black SUVs, their tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. A flatbed truck, massive and gleaming, carrying what looked like a piece of futuristic machinery, and a silver sedan, its sleek lines clearly not made for Kansas dust or Maine gravel. The door of the sedan opened and out stepped Eleanor Vance. She wasn't dressed like a billionaire, not in a suit or designer sunglasses. Just jeans, a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to her forearms, and the same quiet, intense look on her face as that morning Sam had pulled her from the fire. Sam's eyes narrowed, and he took one slow step forward, then another, as if unsure whether this moment was real or just a heat-borne hallucination. "You said you'd be back," he muttered, mostly to himself, then louder, incredulous. "I didn't think you meant this soon." Eleanor gave a faint, almost shy smile. Then she stepped aside and gestured behind her with an open hand. "Didn't think you'd believe it unless I brought the proof with me." Sam's gaze followed the motion and froze. Strapped tight with engineering precision on the flatbed truck sat a brand-new blueberry harvester. It was sleek, stainless steel, spotless. Its mechanical arms folded neatly. Next to it, in the second truck, were crates marked with serial codes and stickers from brands Sam had only seen in glossy catalogs, state-of-the-art solar power-powered irrigation rigs, advanced nutrient delivery systems, soil analysis drones, tools so sophisticated he couldn't even name them. Behind that, two men in crisp polo shirts climbed out of one of the SUVs unrolling blueprints, and a woman in a high-visibility vest was already unfolding a set of documents on the hood of her truck, pointing toward the remains of the barn and taking precise measurements in the air. None of them wore suits, but all of them moved with the efficient, exact movements of highly trained professionals. And they were all here for him. Sam stepped back, overwhelmed, his breath caught in his chest like someone had knocked the wind from him. What is this?" he asked, his voice low, raw, uneven. Eleanor walked slowly toward Sam, each word deliberate, measured. "It's your new beginning." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the devastated field, then back to Sam's bewildered face. "I bought the farm's original deed, cleared its debt, and I also purchased the surrounding acreage, the old forestry land, the abandoned apple orchard, all of it. It's yours now. All of it. We're transferring full ownership by the end of the day. We've got crews coming in tomorrow to restore the barn, rebuild it even stronger, and construct new climate-controlled storage facilities. That's your new self-propelled blueberry harvester designed for this terrain. And over there," she pointed to the stack of crates, "is a full precision agriculture system. The best money can buy." Sam stared at her, speechless. His hands, dirt-streaked and cracked, twitched slightly, like they didn't know what to hold on to, what to grasp in this surreal moment. "Why?" he managed to ask, barely more than a whisper. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping, earnest. "Because you saved my life, and you didn't ask for a damn thing in return. Because I destroyed your harvest, your future, and you were more worried about my safety than your own devastating loss. Because when I woke up in your house, I didn't see pity, I saw strength. I saw a man trying to keep his promise to his daughter, no matter the impossible cost. And because this land, this dream, it mattered." Sam looked down, trying to ground himself, but his eyes landed on the field, what remained of it, and the small, fragile rows where he had replanted, still vulnerable but defiantly alive. Then he looked back at the incredible machines, the focused people, the sheer, staggering scale of what stood before him, and for the first time in years, tears welled in his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. He just let them fall, hot and cleansing, tracing paths through the dust on his face. Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out a crisp white envelope. "And this," she said, her voice softer now, gentler, "is a 4-year full-ride scholarship to the Evergreen Academy for Lily. Tuition, housing, specialized therapies, books, supplies, everything. No loans, no applications, no cash." Sam's knees nearly buckled. He took the envelope as if it were made of fire and glass, holding it to his chest with both hands. He looked over his shoulder toward the farmhouse. Lily was standing on the porch, barefoot, a single hand over her mouth, her eyes wide, with a mixture of confusion and awe. Their eyes met across the yard, and in that instant, neither of them said a word. They didn't have to. Eleanor placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, a gesture of quiet support. "This is yours now. All of it. No strings. Just a thank you for saving more than just my life. You reminded me what truly matters." Sam exhaled, a shaky, ragged sound. Then finally he found his voice, thick with emotion. I don't even know how to say thank you for something like this." Eleanor smiled gently, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. Then don't, just keep planting. And so, in the middle of a field that had once been reduced to ashes, surrounded by machines that would carry his work into the future, Samuel Miller stood still. Not because he was afraid, but because for the first time in his life he had been given the space to dream without limits, to build a future for Lily that surpassed his wildest hopes. 3 months passed, and the land began to sing again. The rows that had once smoldered under the weight of flame now stood tall and orderly, neat green soldiers stretching towards a vast blue Maine sky. The new self-propelled harvester moved like a dream, smooth, precise, silent in its efficiency, its robotic arms gently stripping the ripe berries from the bushes. Sam had learned how to run it himself, every gear and lever, every control panel now second nature. The advanced irrigation system purred in the background, drawing water from the ground, powered by the new solar panels Eleanor had installed near the barn, which had been fully rebuilt with gleaming steel siding and weatherproof insulation, sturdy enough to outlast any storm, any passage of time. There was even a proper office now, a small, efficient space tucked in beside the new climate-controlled processing and storage room, complete with a proper desk, a reliable internet line, and a printer that Lily had insisted on setting up herself before she left. Because Lily had left, on a bright September morning with her small backpack over one shoulder and tears in her eyes, not sad ones, but the kind of tears that carry a pride too big for the small body holding them, Sam had driven her himself, all the way to the Evergreen Academy, the scholarship papers folded carefully in the glove compartment, her name already printed on a dorm room door 2 states away. She had kissed his cheek before she went inside, pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "You gave me the whole world, Daddy." He hadn't answered. His throat had been too tight and his heart too full. He simply nodded and watched her walk into the life she had earned, the future they had both dreamed of. Now the mornings were quieter, lonelier sometimes, but full of a profound purpose. Sam rose before the sun, the way his father once had, and walked the expansive fields with his thermos of coffee in hand. He spoke out loud now sometimes, like his old man used to do, as if the blueberry bushes could hear him. He spoke to the land, to Sarah, to God, and sometimes, without fully realizing it, to Eleanor, who had not returned in person since that pivotal day, but whose impact remained in every plank of the new barn, every glint of steel on the new equipment, and every row of perfect glistening green. Her crews still checked in by phone. Her foundation sent regular updates on Lily's progress, but Sam suspected that the tech mogul had offered what she could, set the trajectory, and then quietly stepped aside, letting the soil, and the man who knew it best, do the rest. On one particular morning, weeks into the autumn harvest, Sam stood at the edge of the far field, sipping coffee and watching a family of deer graze along the tree line that now marked the expanded boundaries of his farm. Behind him, the wind shifted, carrying with it the soft crunch of footsteps on gravel. Measured, deliberate, familiar. He didn't turn right away. He waited until the steps came close enough that the silence between them felt natural. "I told you to keep planting," said Eleanor's voice, warm and low, a hint of a smile in her tone. Sam turned, a grin spreading slow and wide across his face. "And I did." They shook hands, like old friends, like two people who had shared something more profound than words or contracts, something that transcended the simple transaction of debt and generosity. Eleanor looked out over the vast, thriving field with quiet reverence, taking in the impossibly straight lines, the healthy, robust bushes heavy with berries, the glint of dew catching the morning light. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice genuinely moved. Sam nodded. "It's home." They walked together then, past the massive new processing plant, past the new workshed where Sam had started teaching a few neighborhood teenagers how to operate modern farm equipment, how to care for the land, how to build something lasting. Because giving back, he told them, was just a different, equally important kind of harvest. Eleanor asked about Lily, and Sam pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over a recent photo. Lily beaming beside an intricate robot she'd helped build. her academy uniform a little too pristine, her confidence even bigger than her smile. "She's going to build something incredible someday," he said, with a quiet pride that needed no exaggeration. Before Eleanor left, they stood at the edge of the field once more, the sun now high, casting long shadows. She glanced over at Sam and asked, "Do you ever think about that morning? The fire? The loss?" Sam looked toward the far rows, the bushes now golden with late-season growth, the wind nudging them like a blessing. "Every day," he said, his voice soft but without a trace of pain. But not with pain. That fire? It cleared what couldn't be saved. It made room for something better, stronger. Eleanor smiled at that, a thoughtful, knowing expression on her face. Funny, isn't it? How sometimes the worst day of your life turns out to be the beginning of the best one. They stood in silence a little longer, just two people and the vast, vibrant land between them, connected not by wealth or history, but by a single moment of unexpected grace, and the enduring power of a selfless act. As Eleanor's car pulled away, its engine a faint hum dissolving into the quiet Maine countryside, Sam remained, his boots planted firm in the rich, dark dirt, his heart full in a way that no drought, no debt, no disaster could ever diminish. Around him, the blueberry field whispered in the wind, and the farmhouse stood tall behind him, waiting for the girl who would someday return, not just as a daughter, but as the living legacy he had built from fire, from faith, and from the simple, enduring belief that good soil, like good people, always finds a way to grow again. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.